Okay. Okay, one thing we have to do is I'm going to click right here on our hips. We have a mirror modifier on here that we don't need. So we're going to click X to get rid of that. We're going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. We're going to click back on the head. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm then going to continue on. So I'm rolling the mouse to scroll down. Looking for an empty spot. We see one here. So click the thighs. We're going to click the knees. Scrolling down again. Click the lower legs. We'll click the forearms. We're going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate. We'll click here. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. Okay, so what we can do now is scroll up. There's a lot of Boolean modifiers. However, we can just keep our mouse in this position and we can just keep clicking apply and work our way through. And now they are all applied. Okay, I'm going to click on nothingness. I'm going to click on the head. I'm going to hold Control, and then while holding Control, I'm going to use the manipulator to pull our mesh to the side. The reason why I did that is we still have pieces of mesh that need to be connected to this. Because we held Control, we can push this right back into position. And now with this out of the way, I can click on nothingness, and I can press B for box select. I'm going to hold Shift because I held Shift and I clicked on this until this deselected. I'm getting ready to delete these parts of the mesh right here. So I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then delete. I'm going to left. Okay, we have to go here. So select here, then press X to bring up our delete menu, then delete. So now I've just clicked to select our main mesh here. Okay, this is what is about to happen. We are about to check to make sure that this mesh doesn't have any non-manifold areas to it. When you sculpt, if you have manifold areas, once you try to sculpt, typically you'll get holes in your sculpt as well as other issues with your sculpt. They're very difficult to get out of. So your best bet is to make sure you don't have any of those issues before you start sculpting. So what we're going to do is we're about to go into edit mode. When we go into edit mode, we're going to go to select, select similar, and we're going to look for, we're going to go to vertex select. We're going to look to see if we have any non-manifold. If we have any manifold issues, like non-manifold areas, and I believe non-manifold is like areas that give you 3D printed something, things that couldn't exist in the real world. There's other descriptions for it as well. But anyway, we don't want those areas. So we're going to check to see them. If we have any areas light up, that means that that means that when we go to sculpt, we'll have issues, and a lot of those issues are difficult to get rid of. If we don't have any non-manifold issues, we'll be able to sculpt and everything should go well. Okay, as far as dealing with those non-manifold issues, hopefully we won't have that. You can, by rearranging your booleans the way that they are set up, you can sometimes help to deal with those manifold issues. Also, by adjusting the overlap threshold, you can, again, help to deal with them. So that's what we're about to go into and to check out. So with this selected, we're going to go to our upper left. We're going to go to click on the little triangle or next to the little triangle. We're going to go to edit mode. So this isn't that you see selected isn't the manifold things. Like if we see something like that after we do this next part, that'll mean we have issues. So I'm gonna left click on the nothingness. So now we want to go to select. Okay, select by trait. So select all by trait. We want to go to non-manifold. We left click. We're on vertex select, and you see how nothing is lighting up. That is spectacular. And the reason why is that tells us that when we sculpt, as far as how things are now, things should go well for us. So that's excellent. So I'm going to click here, go back to object mode. And then with this selected, I'm going to click on our move tool. I'm then going to hold control. And then while holding control, push this back. You see how it being the mesh is jumping? See how it jumped right back? So the other parts of the mesh are set up and ready for us to connect. So things are looking good so far. Okay, so while the body is set up to connect with our extremities, we're not going to do that currently. With this selected, which is our main mesh, over in our collections window, this is our main mesh where we see spheres. So I'm going to double click here and I'm going to name this main mesh. Okay, so this is our main mesh here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little triangle looking thing that allows us to select that mesh. And the reason why I am doing that is because I'm going to scroll up to the top of this scene collection. I'm going to click this triangle to make it so we can see more room in here. Sometimes when you're trying to do tutorials, it's funny. I don't know, words you'll sit there and you're like, what is that called? But anyway, with things like this, we're gonna right click, and then when we right click, we get this menu that popped up here, right? So I'm gonna click new. So we just made a new collection. So for this collection right here, for this, okay, we're not going to do this collection yet. We're going to double click here. We're going to name this low poly. And this is low poly, going to be low poly compared to the rest of our mesh, what we're going to put in here, and I'll explain that. So now we're going to right click and we're going to select new. So we have our collection 3 right here. So we're going to name this extremities. So with this collection, we have things set up so we can't click this body. So what we can do is I'm going to click on our selection tool here, and I'm going to left click and draw. Now I'm not selecting this because we clicked that triangle inside of the collection, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to press the M key. This brings up our move collection to menu. And then I'm going to select extremities. So now these are in the extremities collection, these other pieces of our mesh. So I'm going to left click to deselect off of our extremities. Okay, and we're also going to right click here, select new again. We have our collection 4. I'm going to double click here, and I'm going to name this extra. And for this, I'm going to click on our empty. I'm going to press the M key. This brings up our move to collection menu, and then I'm going to select extra. So why did I do that? I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect that. So for this empty here, what I can do now is I can click this eye to hide this empty. I can also disable this collection in the viewport just by clicking here. So for now, I'm just going to click this eye as well as this triangle. So now we don't see the empty. And as far as the extremities, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this triangle. So what that means is anything in this collection named extremities, now we can't select them. So now I'm going to go back to our main collection here, click on this arrow or triangle. So we have our main mesh here. So I'm just going to click this triangle. So now we can select our main mesh again. Okay, so with this selected, our main mesh, what I want to do is I'm going to press Shift D. Then I'm going to right click. See that? I really like that. I duplicated this main mesh, and Blender 2.8 gave this a different color. You know, and we're setting a workbench. I really like that because we can see that we have something different here. So anyway, with this selected, we're going to press, and what this is a duplicate of our main mesh. We're going to press M to bring up our Move To collection. Then we're going to select Low Poly. Okay, so now in the Low Poly, I'm going to click to turn off the visibility as well as the ability to select that. And the reason why we did that is I find that when you work on sculpts, a lot of times it's advantageous to be able to come back to a low poly version of your mesh. And that version will be a lot lower poly than this mesh once we start to work as far as sculpting on it. Okay, as far as why I separated the extremities out, if you're like, why'd you do that? They could be a tutorial in and of themselves on just them. Just like the head. There's another tutorial I have on the channel where I show how to do the head. That tutorial alone is a lot. So anyway, right now, for now, I want to focus on the main body. So that's what we're going to do now. So we're just going to left click on our main mesh. Let's get rid of these Boolean modifiers. I'm going to go to our add modifier. I'm going to left click. I'm going to go to subdivision surface. So now we have a subdivision surface on. I'm going to take this up to 2. And then I'm going to click apply. The reason why I did that was I wanted more geometry on our main mesh before we started to sculpt. You could start to sculpt without that. I find that makes things easier to have more geometry as you go to sculpt. So that's just why I did that. Okay, so what is the next step in what we're doing? What we're about to do is we're going to go into the sculpting tab. That's going to change the color, make it easier for us to sculpt. These different pieces that we joined together, the Boolean worked well. It put the different pieces together. However, we need to blend those pieces together. You used to blend those pieces together using something called the clay strips brush is what I used to use. And you kind of like go over the edges with the clay strips brush. There's a new brush in Blender 2.8, the simplified brush. We're going to use that, go over different individual pieces and basically join this mesh together more. Even though it's already joined together, we kind of make it more visually joined. And that's what we're about to do now. Okay, so with our main mesh selected on, we're going to go to the sculpting tab. We're going to left click there. I'm going to roll the mouse to zoom back, hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. Blender 2.8 has things nicely set up so we can see the, I guess you would call them the seams in between our pieces. Well, this is pretty much what we want to get rid of. For the most part, we want to look to our right, see where it says Dyne Topo. This is our way to turn on dynamic topology. And what this does is this option, we're going to put a check mark here. You see this warning that pops up. That's fine. Click OK. Now you see the check mark there. This allows us to, as we sculpt, to basically have as much geometry as we need to sculpt. So we're going to click this triangle right here. This detail size is 12. We're going to left click here. We're going to change this to 5. We're also going to select smooth shading. Now we're going to go to our simplify brush. And basically what we're going to do is blend these different pieces in. So we have our dynamic topology set up. We've got our detail size set for 5, which is what I personally like. Smooth shading is on. We also are now clicked on our simplify brush. Something that's very cool in Blender 2.8 where it's easy to actually show you what dynamic topology is doing, as well as the simplify brushes. We can go up to our upper right to where we have our overlays. Then we can look down and we can click on, see where we see geometry, then you'll see wireframe, right? So we're gonna put a check mark right there. This is cool. So I'm gonna hold shift and you can see our basic wireframe showing us our geometry, right? We have our simplify brush selected. Oh, one thing I remembered before I actually started to sculpt. Look for your symmetry lock, right? It's going to be near your bottom right. Make sure you click to turn your symmetry back on by pressing the X button. So now everything will be on the one side will be affected as on the other side. So see how this geometry looks here. I'm going to hold control with the middle mouse button to zoom in. And watch this. You see how wherever my brush goes, look how much the geometry increased. So basically the way this process is going to go, we're going to take the brush. You can see it increased. So I just left clicked and dragged. Now I'm going to hold shift. Now when I hold shift, what's going on is we're smoothing out this hair area. So we increase the geometry and then we hold shift. It's pretty much the deal we're doing here. So I'm going to hold shift and middle mouse button to pan. I'm not holding shift and now I'm holding shift. Still holding shift, letting go of shift, holding the middle mouse button to rotate, not holding shift, left clicking and dragging, holding shift, and when I hold shift, I activate the smooth tool. So we're going to just these different areas, and see this looks, I'm gonna, well, let's see, okay, I'm not holding shift. Now I'm holding shift. So that's pretty much what we want to do. And yeah, the wireframe is cool because you can actually see, look at that geometry. Blender 2.8 is very good. So many different ways. And it's just neat. You can see how the geometry changes. So I'm rolling the mouse wheel to zoom in. Sometimes I'll roll the geometry, roll the mouse wheel to zoom in. Other times I'll hold control and the middle mouse button. It gives me a smoother zoom. So I'm left clicking, just left clicking. Now I'm holding shift. So pretty much wherever things are joined. And that's pretty much what I'm doing. Just left clicking and then holding shift. And you notice when I hold shift and the smooth, you don't see more geometry. You just see the geometry getting spread out. Pretty cool. So if you want, you can stay here and do that, or you can also actually come back to the overlays, go to wireframe, and then click to unselect wireframe. Okay, yeah, it used to be that when you did this before, you would use the clay strips brush. That's I think I'm just having a glitch. Now I can't see my brush. I can see where my cursor's at. Yeah, so I'm just, I don't know if it helps you or not to see it too. You know, if you want to keep the wireframe on, you know, if that helps you keep that on. You could always go back, like start off doing that and then go back, you know, over this. Because at least in here, it kind of, when you work like this, you kind of like see it. You don't see it as well as you can see it with the wireframe. It seems like it has advantages and disadvantages. So I'm just holding the mouse button to turn. I'm not clicking. Now I'm holding shift to smooth out, letting go of shift, holding shift again. You want to do this general, you know, kind of joining things together. Okay, now see this area right here, how flat it is, right? So we'll add geometry here, right? For this, I'm going to go to the clay strips, and this is what we would use before. You would put clay strips. They didn't have, they being Blender, didn't have the Simplify brush. So I'm going to add geometry here, right? You want to be careful here. And what I mean is, when I sculpt here, I can affect the front because this is fairly thin. So what you want to do to make sure that you don't affect like the other side of this part of the leg is look to your right. Here's our clay strip settings. See where we see front faces only, put a check mark there, and now I should be safe. So what I'm doing is, I just pressed F to increase my brush, by the way. I'm increasing the geometry here. Hold the middle mouse button, rotate. Because I have that front faces on, I shouldn't have issues here. I'm going to turn this off. Zoom in here. F. And you can still, like, you still can use this instead of the Simplify brush. Like, see how I'm, like, putting on geometry? Because, I'll show you. So this, when I go back to wireframe, with this, oh, look at that. That's not, okay. I thought it was doing, what the world? My dynamic topology brush is turned off. Okay, so let's go back to, that was interesting. Okay, see, okay, so see the clay strips, how when I click, this does very similar to the Simplify brush. So this is how we used to, let's say how I used to do this. And you know, you can sit there and hold shift, major smoothing here. So we got this here. Smoothing this out here. I know that this is, you know, on the bottom is similar to, you know what? Yeah, turning front faces on for here would be wise. If you're like, why, you know, why not? Because this is a lot of times, like I'll say things like I would think like, why go through the blocking out all this stuff? Like, why do that? And yeah, you can just sculpt. I find that the blocking out process allows you to think more. It just doesn't. It just seems. It feels to me. It seems like it helps as far as creativity, rather than just going in and sculpting. So if you need something fast, yes, you can come in and just sculpt. And that's what's nice is like this technique. You can use this, or you can use the other one. I like the blocking out technique. Seems like I get much better results this way. You guys who have watched videos on my channel for a while know my main thing was box modeling, and box modeling still has its uses. If you need something fast and quick, I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate. Box modeling, you can box model something very quick. You can have your mesh ready to rig it and to put it out. However, I find that when you're box modeling, if you're trying to compete against someone sculpting, it's very difficult to compete box modeling versus sculpting. As far as the blockout process, the blockout process, it just seems very creative. Let me stop. Okay, so we still have our actually reference images in here. We haven't used them in a while, so there's our reference image. So for the most part, we look similar. Now, right here, we need to match that up. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to go to the grab brush. I'm going to kind of look here. I'm going to press F. Now I'm going to spin. I'm going to go to the flake brush. Just kind of matching back. And we're still, in a weird way, we're still blocking out in a sense. We're like in the sculpting version of blocking out. If you're like, why you're doing that, it's just, the general way the muscles would kind of flow. Just basic, is what I'm thinking here. Like, still have work to do, and that's one thing about 3D. There's technical part of it, and then artistic part. It's interesting. Okay. I'm going to go into overlay, turn off the wireframe. Go back to the simplify brush. Blend this in more here. Some of the lines where you see some of the lines, see this right here, let's deal with that. Some of these lines are good to have. We're also going to put most likely we're going to put a smooth modifier on, so these lines won't be as hard. Okay, I'm going to go to clay strips, and I want to deal with this here, so I'm going to go, front faces is still on, okay. So I'm adding geometry, and then I'm smoothing it out. And basic stuff here. So the front faces, if you're like, okay, when do we use the front faces? When do we not? If you're dealing with something thin, the front face is good to turn on. For something that is like a thin material, you'll tend to have issues. What kind of issues? You'll affect areas that you didn't you'll tend to affect areas you didn't plan to have affected. Like the other side of a mesh that you're not looking at if the area is thin enough. It's kind of like if you did the block out like this method, it's kind of like the block out. The block out it can be fun as well. However, once you get to sculpting and you can Kind of like getting an artistic mode. Like it's fun. I think it's fun. I think 3D in general is pretty amazing. Just what the things you can do with it are unbelievable. Okay, people, prepare yourselves for this next process. We're going to be changing proportions. We're going to be adding a lot of detail in. So make sure you have your dynamic topology turned on. Okay, so I'm going to go to the crease brush, and I am saying to prepare yourself. To you, I'm saying it to myself as well. I just find that it helps in this next process as we add these details in. Just it's a good to work and say, okay, you know, we're working, we're going to add the details in. We're not going to let ourselves be concerned so much, because things will get better. We do want to add these details in. So I'm adding detail into the forearm, adding detail around the bicep area, and the thoughts going through my mind are go ahead and work, and do not be afraid to change things. That's pretty much what's going through my mind. These detail that you're putting in here, one of the things I want to tell you is don't think to yourself you don't want to put in too much at this point, because we're going to be changing a lot of this and taking a lot of things out. I'm going to go to the blob brush, and some of the things I'm putting in are just things I want in just for anatomy's sake. And I am overdoing things because a lot of the detail we're putting in will be taken out. And hopefully you'll understand more later. Building up this rib cage area. Hopefully you'll see what I mean later on. So I'm holding shift this move button. Okay. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate. And some of the details that we're putting in will actually have to re-put in. And you'll see why. And hopefully later, you guys, if you've been with me all this time, this is kind of like putting in the detail for like the clavicles, kind of come from the front, go towards the middle of the deltoid. These are muscles that help you to turn your head right there. Hold control, middle mouse button to zoom back, hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to go to our crease brush. The crease brush is very good for putting in cuts. It's also good for sharpening things. this point on the hips. When you hold control in Blender, you do the opposite. So the crease puts lines in. If you hold control, the crease brush will go the opposite, so it'll make edges. So I am holding the crease to put an edge right here on this hip. And if you're like, what in the world? A lot of these details will come out and actually have to be put in later. So here I am defining, giving some definition to the quadriceps here. I do not want the model to have this much definition for the quads. However, I want it there to be the hint of it later. You'll see. So on the grab brush, the knees need to be reshaped. So I'm holding shift to smooth this out. And the method, this is my method, still learning sculpting myself. Sometimes I think it's good to, it's strange as it sounds to have somebody who is learning something show it to you. And the reason why, if somebody said, well, yeah, why would that make sense? Well, a lot of times when I notice things that are difficult, I'm holding the mouse button to rotate because I'm still learning myself. And sometimes it just seems like people get so into, like, they're so used to doing what they're doing that they forget to explain certain things. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. Again, I don't want this much detail to be in the model. And once the model is done, you'll see why I'm doing this. Okay, I'm going to hold shift. I'm also holding control. I'm now left clicking and dragging this lasso select. I'm selecting most of the top part of the body, and I let go, and we have a mask over that whole top part of the body there. The reason why I did that is I want to change the proportions of the body, so I'm going to go to the grab brush. I'm going to press F to increase my the size of my brush. And by doing this, I can make changes to the hip structure as well as the legs. I want to make the shoulders to be a little bit narrower, more narrow. I'm going to hold control and then press I. I'm going to press F, shrink my brush down. So I'm going to bring them in too much. F. So now I'm going to hold Alt, then press M. When I inverted that selection, by the way, that was Control I, is what I did to invert the mask. Okay, so basically what's going through my head now is I'm like, what can I overemphasize as far as detail? What do I want to be, cuts do I want to put in that are almost overemphasized? So that's what I'm thinking now as I do this. I'm going to go to the, if I save, if you're like, why is this dynamic topology turn off? If I save, I'm pretty sure it turns off. So I'm just bringing this out more here. I'm actually going to go to crease brush. If you're like, why is he doing all that? No, I don't want the final result to be like this. I don't want the final result to be like this. Just so you know, I'm just setting this up for what I want, trying to help out. just putting extra detail. Using the crease brush. That was just using the crease without control. It's not as difficult when you're thinking, so I want extra detail here. This here. Smooth this out. So I'm using this simplify brush, and then I'm holding shift. Simplify brush. I'm actually going to go to my clay strips brush. Shift. Okay. I'm going to hold control. This wasn't middle mouse, but I did that to zoom back. I'm just taking a look. Okay, we are about to add a smooth modifier on here. We want our details to be lowered down, but not so much that our shapes drastically change. So you need to have your dynamic topology turned on. Currently, my dynamic topology is set for 5. Refine method, subdivide, collapse. Detailing is relative detail. If you look below my triangles, see where it says triangles, 211,848. That's important to know as far as how much geometry you're using. The faster your computer is, the more you can be free as far as how much geometry you have. The current computer that I'm on, I am working on a Alienware laptop. I have a GTX 1070 card that has 8 gigs of RAM in the video card. I also have 32 gigs of RAM for the computer in general. So I'm telling you that so that depending on what we do next, if your computer is a little bit lower powered, you can take steps to not have your geometry drastically increase. Okay. Okay, so I am going to click overlay, click wireframe. We can take a look at our geometry. What I'm looking here is I'm looking at the density of the geometry, and there's some places more dense than others, like right here compared to here. I want to spread the geometry out from a certain area throughout the most of the mesh, so everything for the most part is even, so that when we put the smooth modifier on, we don't have a lot of changes in our shape. Well, I want the detail to be lessened. I don't want us to change these shapes. So right now I'm looking here because it doesn't look like this is too much or too little. Okay, so what we're going to do is something called a detail flood. How do you do that? And what does a detail flood do? Detail flood is I'm thinking about taking this geometry and basically making the mesh throughout the mesh have this much geometry. So currently, if you look below my triangle, 211,848 triangles, right? If we take from here, we'll probably actually lower our geometry down. So how do we do this detail flood and lower things down? We go to where we see relative detail. We click the triangle. We're going to change to constant detail. And then this eyedropper is going to let us pick from an area to fill the rest of our model with that amount of detail. So currently this is set for 3. I'm going to click here. I didn't do it yet. So now I'm clicking here. So remember, before we click anything, that's 3. Now I'm clicking here. So this resolution is 8.32. Okay, so this didn't do anything yet. This just is telling Blender 2.8 what to do as far as the detail mesh. To do the actual detail mesh, see where it says remesh here? We're going to click this triangle here. Now we have this detail flood here. I'm just rolling my mouse more to see more. So I'm about to click detail flood, and from this area here, which was 8.32, that should fill the rest of the mesh. So let's do that. So I'm going to left click now. And now if you see now, pretty much the rest of the mesh matches up with this. Also, our polygon count actually went down, so our triangles now are 122,928. Okay, so now that we have that, we should be good for our smooth modifier. So we're going to go back to layout. This next step, depending on the power of your computer, you can, I'm going to duplicate this model, which is going to put more load on my computer. If your computer's, if you're concerned about the power of your computer, you might want to just skip this next step. This is just so we can visually see what's going on. So I'm clicked on the mesh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Shift D, and I like that a lot. There's our duplicate. I'm going to right click, right? Now I'm going to, well, not yet. I did hold Control. I'm going to go to our Move tool. I'm going to hold Control. And while holding Control, I am pulling this other duplicated mesh to the side. Okay, I pulled this to the side so we have something to look back on. This is where we're starting. So now we're going to click on our main mesh. We're going to go to Add Modifier. We're going to click the triangle. We're going to go to the Smooth Modifier. Okay, this is the Smooth Modifier here. For the factor, you want to click here, change this to 1. And for the repeat, I'm going to change this to 20. And now when I click 20, see, remember what I said? I overdid the detail. See what happened when I took this to 20? So basically what we want to do now is, so I took it to 20. We still have the basic shapes, and that's what I was trying to do by making all of that hard detail. So like when I was telling you, I want the hint of the detail, and you can see that here. So what I'm thinking now is I'm like, okay, do I want to smooth this less, smooth this more? So I'm holding the middle mouse button, looking, and we can go back in and re-emphasize, but specifically where we want some of the detail. I think that I like how this is. Pretty sure. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our main collection. We have all these other collections. So I think I am going to take this. I'm going to click here. I'm going to press the M key. And then that brings up our Move To collection. I'm going to move this to Extra. And then I'm going to hide Extra. So what we have there by doing that is we have a backup. If we decide that we want to change things, we can go back to our backup. I'm going to apply this Smooth modifier because in Sculpt won't show the Smooth modifier as far as I know. So I'm going to apply this. That's why I wanted the backup. So that backup doesn't have any kind of modifier on it. If we want to redo this, we can just go to the backup. Okay, while we're out here, let's click on the nothingness. I'm going to click here. Oh, we need to make this selectable for our hand. That's why when I went to select it, I couldn't select the hand because the extremities was unselectable by that triangle there. So now I'll left click and drag. And I'm going to press, that's to scale this down. I'm going to click on our Move tool here. And move that up, and then I'm going to just left click on nothingness again. Hold Control. I'm going to click. That's to scale on the Z axis twice for this. I'm going to left click on the nothingness to deselect. Okay, let's click on our main mesh. We're almost through this. So with this clicked on, we'll click on our sculpting tab. We're going to go to overlays, turn off the wireframe. We'll come here. Hopefully you'll realize that you can have things as smooth as you want them to be. I'm pressing F and then push my mouse in this, lower the size of my brush. I'm holding Shift to smooth out this line here. I'm going to go to the crease brush. There we go. Right there. Go to the grab brush. Smooth that out. Some of the thighs look a little flat to me. Let's go. Hold Control, hold Shift towards the middle mouse button to pan down. Hold Control towards the middle mouse button to zoom in. Go to the blob brush. Press F to scale down my brush. Come from the back of the dynamic topology is not on. There we go. Holding Shift to smooth that out. The smooth modifier will also help with that. Press F. Go back to our grab brush again. F. Just making some fairly small adjustments here. Whenever you are modeling a character that's female, it's interesting because it's difficult to do females. If you make a mistake, you know, it's pretty obvious. Not to mention the style that you choose for your female. So I like superhero type of, looking characters in general. So I'm going to grab brush. I want to move this out some here. So what I'm going to do is hold Shift, hold Control to mask this area right here. Hold Shift and Control to mask that area there. So now I'm going to hold Alt-M to take that off. I'll press F to shrink my brush and smooth that out some there. I'm going to go to the crease brush. I'm going to go to the grab brush again. Increase this. We'll go to the inflate brush. Sometimes when you're trying to get something to move together, it's easier to just inflate it. And the crease brush should not crease the smooth modifier. We'll smooth some of this out. Control, taking a look at everything. I'm going to hold control, the middle mouse button to zoom forward. I'm going to go back to the crease brush. Trying to remember how the forms look, because they change shape depending on where you know, which angle you're looking at them from. Okay. Okay, we're going to go to layout. We're going to add a smooth modifier. We're going to change the factor to 1. We're going to change the repeat to 20. And I just learned that you can see your smooth modifier in sculpting mode, which is very nice. So we can actually go back to sculpting mode, click on our modifier, okay, yeah. So there's with smooth, without smooth. So this is nice. I didn't think we could do it, so we can do it. So let's take this to 10. Just looking at it with the smooth and without the smooth. Let's take this up to 20 again. As far as being concerned about this smooth, I mean, you can do a lot with the smooth modifier. Okay. I'm going to take this to 15 because we lost a lot of the detail there. Oh, control. So it's the middle mouse button, hold control the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to go to layout. I'm going to click apply. I'm going to go back to sculpting. I'm going to go to my crease brush. Press F. Trying to bring back the form is there from before. Just some of this, and there we go. Dynamic topology is off. Now it's back on. I'm going to shift the middle mouse button to pan. Nope. Sometimes you can hold control to give more emphasis here. Okay. let's take a look at her. Let's go to inflate. I'm gonna hold control, which lets me deflate calf here. I go to crease brush. Smooth. I don't want there to be heavy definition, but I just want there to be a hint of it. So I'm smoothing out that. Should be a space kind of come in a little here. So our mask brush is here. So what we can do with this, right here, you can actually go like this if you want to pull an area in. And basically, actually while I was doing this, my wife came out, she looked at it and she was like, when it moves, like if you are going to rig this with the legs have a spot. And I thought about it and I was like, oh. So I have this masked and protected. I can hold control, press I to invert. So now we just have this. So what I can do, so I'm actually going to take the blob brush to push in here. Now I'll hold Alt M. Okay, that was extreme. Hold and shift. That's what I'm thinking because harder to talk. See, I think that works better for rigging. So basically when her legs are close together, there should be a space there. I said it's interesting, often interesting. Modeling a female from, like, as you do it, thinking about, you know, people's comments and all that, what they'll be. I'm just taking a look at this now. Shift, smoothing out some there. I just wanted this to be a little more prominent there. Okay. Okay, we're going to go to layout. Let's take a look at these hands. We're going to try to quickly go through this. Okay, so as far as the hands, what we want to do is we want to left click on the hand here. Let's take off the mirror modifier. So I'm just taking a mirror modifier. All of the individual pieces that make up the fingers. Okay. Okay, what we want to do now is we want to click here. We want to change Blender's default pivot point, which is the median point, to individual origins. The reason why we want to do this is so we can select these fingers. I'm gonna hold Control as well as the middle mouse button. I was holding Shift, by the way, to select them all at the same time. I'm going to press R to rotate on the Y-axis. And we're doing this just so the fingers have a bend to them. Now we're going to press S to scale. Because we have individual origins, these fingers will scale in place, so to say. So now what we can do is push these in like this. We'll click here. We'll do R to rotate on the X-axis for the thumb. We'll press S to scale like that. And press S to scale like that. Then we'll now left click on nothingness. Okay, and we can adjust the length of the finger. So there would be the middle finger, which should be the longest. So I'll click here, hold Shift. Careful how you do this. I'm trying to get an arc shape kind of here. So this should be the longest finger. This one here, I'm holding Shift. We're going to move that up. This should be the pinky finger. Move that up. We'll also press S to scale. Take a look. Hold Shift. The manipulator's getting in the way. I'll click here. Oh, I'll click here. Hold Shift. That's an I'm holding Cap Lock. Okay. Pushing this over just to get some room for this. Holding Cap Lock again. I was trying to get Cap Lock again. Get all the fingers. Oh, man. And I'm going to hold as the scale. Trying to make sure that they're inside of that, what I have set up for that palm area there. Left click to click on the nothingness. Okay, I'm going to click here, go to Add Modifier, add Boolean Modifier. I'm going to change intersect to union. I'm going to select Copy. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we're just going to go in order. So from here, very similar to what we did before. Taking the eyedropper. Now we're just working our way through. Fingers. I'm just selecting the eyedropper, rolling the mouse so I can see the next eyedropper option. Okay, so let's wait a second. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Looks good. Okay, so we're gonna go all the way up to the top. We can just put our mouse right in this area. We don't have to move it. We just click and apply. Now we need to check to make sure this is good. What we're gonna do is we are going to, let's hold Control, pull this to the side. Now left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold Control, hold the right mouse button to select. Then I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu. Then I'm going to select delete. Okay. Now we need to check to make sure we don't have any issues with manifold areas. So we're going to, with this selected, we're going to go to our upper left, go to object mode, go to edit mode. We're going to go to select. We're going to go down to select all by trait. We're going to select non-manifold, and there are no issues. So this is good. So we're going to go back to object mode. I'll roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. Okay, we're going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to hold Control, push this back into position. I'm going to go to add modifiers. I'm going to go to mirror modifier. I'm then going to look for our mirror object. I'm going to click here. Remember that empty we named E for mirror. We're going to left click on that. Now we have our hand mirrored. We're then going to click apply. Okay, we're going to go to sculpting mode. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm holding Shift and the middle mouse button to pan. Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. We're going to click to make sure we have dynamic topology on. I'm going to change this resolution to 5. Why am I talking so fast? Because we did this before, so I'm hoping that you remember from before. We're going to go to detail. We use this constant detail for detail flood. I tend to sculpt in relative detail. Normally sculpt in relative detail, so I'm going back to that. What other things that we need to turn off this symmetry. So we're going to click there to turn that off. We click the X to turn off the mirror, the symmetry lock for mirror. Okay, so we're going to go to the simplify brush. We're going to zoom in. We're going to go to overlays. We're going to turn on wireframe mode. Hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan. And we are putting geometry where we need it. And now I'm holding Shift to smooth out that geometry. I'm going to press F, make my brush bigger, holding the middle mouse button to rotate. Holding Shift. Holding Shift, I let go of Shift just to rotate the view. Holding Shift again. Not holding Shift. Holding Shift now. Still holding Shift, not holding Shift. Holding Shift now. When I'm not holding Shift, I'm adding geometry. And I'm holding Shift, I'm smoothing out the geometry. We also need to have front faces turned on. Not holding Shift, holding Shift. When I'm not holding Shift, I am adding geometry. Not holding Shift. Now holding Shift. Not holding Shift, holding Shift. Press F. Put a lot of geometry here. Holding Shift and the mouse button to pan view. Pressing F to shrink the brush. Not holding Shift. Holding Shift. Not holding Shift. Holding Shift. Holding Shift. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button. Zoom back. I go to the grab brush. I'm gonna just adjusting the shape. Go to simplify brush, add some geometry there. Grab brush, holding control as well as the middle mouse button. Zoom in. Pulling, holding shift now. Holding shift. I'm going to go to the inflate brush. Inflate right here around the thumb. Also here. Hold control to deflate here. Not holding control, holding shift to smooth this out. Holding control, holding shift. Press F. I'm going to go to the blob brush, holding control so I can kind of dig in there. Not holding control. Holding control. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take the blob brush, we're going to go press F like this. I'm going to go to overlays, turn off the wireframe overlay. Go to the blob brush here. Similar deal. If you're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Remember our friend Smooth Brush. So I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. We're going to go back to layout. We're going to take a closer look at the hand. I'm holding shift and middle mouse button. Pan, holding control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. We're going to go to the add modifier button. We are going to go to the smooth brush. We're going to change our factor to 1. Let's see what 10 looks like. So we can click this, looks like a little monitor to see. Let's try 5. Let's try 20. Okay. Okay, now because this is a modifier, we can turn this on and off to see how things look. And one of the things that we didn't do, I'm going to take this off. I'm going to go back to sculpting mode. Is we're going to go to make sure we have dynamic topology on. We're going to change our relative detail to constant detail. Why are we doing this? We're doing this so that we can do a detail flood. Detail flood makes your geometry be the same pretty much everywhere. So let's look for an area. I like that area right there. We'll take the eyedropper. We'll click here. We have that detail for there. Now we're going to left click on detail flood. Now we've got that detail. And now we're going to go back to layout. So now here in layout, now when we put our, we're going to click on the, we're going to add the modifier tab. We're going to click on the triangle. We're going to click smooth modifier. We're going to take our factor to 1. Let's take our repeat to 20. And now we have more of our hand shape. We didn't lose as much. I'm good with 20. I'm going to click apply. Okay, so as far as joining the mesh to the hands, I am not too concerned about that for myself. It would probably cause issues. So what we're going to do for now is leave the hands as they are. I'm going to hold control. When I say leave them as they are, we're going to leave them unattached to the Boolean. However, we are going to join them to our mesh so we can work with them in sculpt mode. So with the hand selected, we're going to hold shift. While holding shift, we're going to left click on our main mesh. I let go of shift, we're going to hold control and then press J. And you can see the hands turn the color of our main mesh because the hands are now a part of this mesh right here. Okay, I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button and zoom back. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to click here. I'm going to go to our modifier tab and then I'm going to click apply to apply our mirror modifier. Okay, with this selected, I'm going to go to edit mode. We're on vertex select. I'm going to click on the nothingness. I'm going to hover here, press L. I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu. I'm going to choose vertices to delete. I'm going to go to the upper left, click on object mode. And I wanted to get rid of the modifier just to make things simplified. We'll shape this and then we'll do what we need to do to make it easier, I think, without the mirror modifier on. Okay, so I'm going to click to go to sculpting mode. We want our symmetry to be off for this. We want our dynamic topology to be turned on. I'm going to go to detailing and change this to relative detail. I'm then going to go to the simplify brush and simplify. It's right here. I'm going to go to the grab brush. Hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Hold control the middle mouse button to zoom in. Press F to bring up the strength of my grab tool, and I'm just adding shape. Holding shift to smooth that out. I'm going to go to inflate. Holding shift here. Inflating some here. Hold control and the middle mouse button to zoom back. Okay, I'm going to go back to layout mode. I'm going to, with the foot clicked on, I'm going to go to add modifier. I'm going to add a mirror modifier. I am going to go to the mirror object. I'm going to select the E for mirror. I'm then going to click apply. With the foot selected, I'm going to hold shift. While holding shift, I'm going to left click on our main mesh. I'm then going to hold control, press J. So now these are not connected by Boolean. However, this part of the mesh, this foot mesh, along with its mirrored part, is connected to our main mesh. Okay, I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button. Taking a look, I'm going to go to sculpt mode. I'm going to go to overlay, turn off wireframe, hold shift and middle mouse button to pan. Let's take a look in this. with some different views. So this right here is giving us, this is called a matte cap. That color you see there is, the matte cap is making that look like that, as well as the cavity, which makes things easier as far as that sculpting. We can click here and we can change the matte cap and take a look at our character and just see it in kind of a new light. There's a bunch of different matte caps to look through. I'm gonna go, let's see this. Looks cool. I'm gonna click, I'm gonna go back to the matte cap that we had. I'm gonna go to click on dynamic topology and then click on, see this doesn't have smooth shading, which is, I guess that maybe it does. Okay, we're gonna go back to layout. And now that we have these other objects in, one last time for the smooth modifier. Factor, we'll change this to 1. Change the smooth modifier to 5. We really don't want to lose much detail. Let's take this to 2. Let's take it to 1. The sculpting, it's a little easier to see here. Take this up to 2. I'm just trying to see. Okay, I'm going to click, well, I'm going to go back to layout. I'm going to click apply. Okay, so this is our finished female model. We're going to put some clothes on this. Very quick. Actually, I think it is quick. We're going to click here. We're going to go to edit mode. Here in edit mode, we're going to click on our green Y. We're going to left click and drag here. We need to turn on our wireframe. Let's do that again. Left click and drag. I'm not holding shift, so we lost the old selection and got a new selection. Now I'm holding shift. Okay. Okay, I'm holding shift. Trying to basically make shoulder straps there. Trying to purposely dodge the arms. Now I'm holding shift again. Holding shift again. Hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to press C for Paint Select to take away that selection there. Holding the middle mouse button to rotate. Pressing C for Paint Select here. Same thing here. C for Paint Select again. C for Paint Select. So now let's turn off. Let's go to solid so we are not making it being the selection more difficult by going through the selection. So I'm going to take this away. Hold the mouse button to rotate. Press C as well as the middle mouse button to deselect. Press C as well as the middle mouse button to deselect. C as well as the middle mouse button to deselect. C as well as the middle mouse button to deselect. C for to select. Okay, so with this selected, I'm going to hold Shift, press D. So I duplicated that. I'm going to right click to get this to stay in place. I'm now going to press P for Paint Select. I'm going to choose what P brought up our separate menu. That's what you choose. See here, I'm going to choose Selection. So I made that selection that I had duplicated into its own object. With that done, I'm going to click here and then go to Object Mode. Okay, I'm going to click here. And then I'm going to hold Shift, press D, then right click. So I just duplicated the object we just duplicated. I did that just to change the color, by the way. I'm going to press G. So this is the original duplicate. I'm going to press X and then choose to delete that. And this looks kind of strange right here to me. So I'm going to go to Front, Select. Then I'm going to go to Edit Mode. I went in, I'm like, am I selected on what I want? Yeah, now I'm selected on what I want. Maybe I was before. Okay, now I'm selected, so I'm going to click here. Press X. Whoops. Oh, no. Right click. Ugh. To click on nothing. Ugh. My brain was just going back and forth between multiple versions of Blender. Right click to get out of Paint Select. Then I still want that selected. I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu. Then I'm going to choose vertices to delete. Now I'm going to click and then go to Object Mode. There we go. Okay. Okay, so with this selected, we want to add a modifier to it. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to go to the Solidify modifier. I'm going to go to Thickness. I'm going to take this to the left. I'm going to hold Shift or Find Control. Okay, so when we go to Sculpt and we see how things look, right, that's a little too thick, I think. Okay, so when we see how things look, that's And that scope, that's a matte cap. So we're going to click here. Well, we're going to click on matte cap. So now we can see our mesh and what the mesh looks like having some clothes on it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to go to our scene collection, right click, select new. We have this new collection 5. We're going to double click here. We're going to name this clothes. And I'll just click out of there. We're going to click on our clothes. We're going to press M. Then we're going to choose left click on clothes, or we left clicked on clothes. So now we can easily see our mesh with the clothes on as well as without them. So we'll click here and we can see the work that we did. And then we can click here and see how this looks like with clothes on. Taking a look at it, and I like how it turned out. Hopefully you can see you can do a lot with the smooth modifier as far as smoothing your mesh out. As far as proportions, you know, once you have your blocking done, your basic shapes in, you can change the proportions fairly easily. Okay, if you are still watching this tutorial, congratulations, you made it to the end. Hopefully you learned a lot from watching this tutorial. Hopefully you see that it's fairly easy to change the proportions once you have your blocking done. And congratulations again. I know I can go on and on. It's amazing how much you learn from tutorials as you're actually doing them sometimes. Okay, I wanted to let you guys know I now have a Patreon. If you would like to support me, you can look in the description for this video and get to the Patreon link. You can also go to my web page and see the Patreon link there. So yeah, if you guys would like to help me out, that would be very cool. Also, thank you for helping me out by watching this video. Okay guys, that's it for the tutorial. For all of those of you out there who like the videos on this channel and reshare them, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And for those of you who are new to this channel, if you like the videos on this channel and you would like to see more, please subscribe and thank you for viewing.